Welcome to this session with myself. My name is Terry Liggins. I am with the Hurdle Life Coach. I'm so excited to have this opportunity to present to all of the workers and professionals and helpers in this space of just navigation and support in the workplace with adult basic education, instructors and learners and teachers. And it's really an honor for me to be here. As I look at my professional experiences and the things that I've been doing over the last 16 years, I really get excited about talking about this very topic: cross-cultural relationship building. The last couple of years have really been eye-opening, and is that an office cat? The last couple of years have really been eye-opening and really brought a lot of things to the surface for us as professionals. And navigating diversity, equity, and inclusion and cross-cultural relationships has certainly risen to the top. 2020 shook everything up with the George Floyd incident, our very contentious election, and then also COVID-19. And having conversations around race and justice. How do we honor all people? How do we include all people? This has been an ongoing conversation for many years, but really as of late has really became hot topic in the workspace and workplace. So I'm thrilled to step in and step up to really help us navigate that. And I was really honored to receive this opportunity to talk about that today. Cross-cultural relationship building, awareness, and sensitivity in the workplace. When I think about, again, where my credibility comes from in this space, is because I've lived it. I've absolutely have lived my entire life, 36 years, figuring out and working to navigate how do I fit in new environments? How do I, advocate for myself where I'm seen as a whole person? And how is it now that I can help other environments and places do that exact same thing? When I was preparing for this presentation, there are some questions that I was considering for shaping and crafting this presentation. And I'm going to share some of those questions with you now. So when I was looking at this and thinking about who I'm going to be speaking with and how is it that I can be helpful, some of the things I'm assuming you're asking yourself as you participate here in this conference, this symposium, can you think of examples of the challenges you're facing when it comes to cultural sensitivity? I want you to ruminate on that and think about this. Which cultural backgrounds are represented within your current workplace? Because before we can start, operating and implementing the solutions, we've got to look at what are our opportunities. We got to do some data mining. We got to do the pre-work to figure out where we're at. Because once we figure out where we're at, then we can start talking about where we're going and how we get there. So what are the cultural backgrounds that are represented within your current workplace? What do you feel is working well so far? And can you offer any success stories of the efforts that you have in place? So often we come into environments looking to get better, which is the right mindset. Certainly I remind my team at Hurdle Life, and when I do my coaching work, that the biggest space in the room is the room for improvement. So we have to continue to look at that in all humility. How can we get better? But also let's look at what we're doing well. And so I would encourage you to do that as you navigate this space of uncertainty and newness, to really look at the wins that you already have in place. What's working well so far? And can you offer any success stories on that? And then doing the work to really highlight and promote those success stories, because that's going to inspire more of that. That's going to inspire more of that same activity, expressing gratitude and recognition over the wins that you're already incurring. To your knowledge, what questions do your staff have about diversity? Have you done that work? Have you combed through your current team and done an assessment on their current knowledge base and see what questions they have. We don't want to be assumptive here. We don't want to assume what people know or don't know. We want to actually do the solid pre-work to understand what questions are out there. And so as leaders in the workspace, you got to do that pre-work to figure out what questions your staff actually has so you can actually hit the mark, because you cannot hit a target you don't see. I really enjoy this next question. What does it mean to be truly cross-culturally competent? What all goes into the competency of being cross-cultural? Part of what you can expect to hear today from me in this seminar is a deeper dive into what it is to be cross-cultural and some of the competencies that go along with that. I'm going to share with you some strategies, 3 strategies that I've identified. And of course, there's more, but 3 key strategies that I've identified that will help you to be more cross-culturally competent. I also have a lighthouse moment that I really want to breathe into and I'll share with you. And then there's also another anchoring concept called lingua franca, English as a lingua franca, that I really want to share with the audience today. So you'll become more cross-culturally competent today because of that. 6 questions. How do we attract, equip, and retain our future workforce? I'm sure you're wondering that. What will prepare our current supervisors and executives and teams and frontline staff to be more welcoming and inclusive? What is it that will set up? What is it that will set us apart, to attract a diverse range of talent, eager and proud to join our team? As you're looking at recruiting methods and approaches, this new workforce, this emerging workforce, they're wired a little differently. As it goes with all generations. Everything changes with time, and there's no exception with this current workforce. And with this workforce, when they're looking for in employers, they're looking for a place that they can be proud to align with. To be competitive in today's market, to be an employer of choice is to offer more than just great wages. And workers nowadays are really wondering and curious about where and how do you align yourself with your corporate social responsibilities? How are you practicing philanthropy? And recent research is revealing that being philanthropic is actually competitive. This emerging future workforce, they're looking for organizations that are aligning with issues and challenges that matter to them personally. And so when you can be the type of employer that makes an investment of time, talent, or resources into nonprofit organizations that align with some of the challenges either they've experienced themselves or their loved ones have experienced, this is going to set you apart in the workplace as you look to attract diverse talent. So what are some of the things that you can do to set you apart as you look to attract diverse talent, where they're eager to work for your organization and proud to join your team? I'd certainly invite you to look at what does it look like? What is your commitment to corporate social responsibility and philanthropy? And what are some of the critical impediments that will hinder our progress and impact engagement and cripple staff potential when left unaddressed? For me, as well as an educator, one of the things I'm really passionate about is informing organizations, entities, teams, systems on the importance of what it means to be trauma informed. I do work primarily with youth and adults that have been impacted by detention and incarceration and adversity, adverse childhood experiences. And this conversation is not leaned into as often as it could be and really should be, because what we know about trauma and what we know about ACEs, these adverse childhood experiences, that these things are common. And when you're talking about a diverse workforce and you're talking about a diverse talent pool, we have to then come to the place where we realize that all of this talent comes from diverse experiences, backgrounds. When we're talking about people from different countries of origins and states and towns and communities that have survived lots of adversity and different types of trauma. And so for me, one of those key impediments to impact engagement is organizations that are not trauma informed. Is your organization having that conversation? Do you believe that being trauma informed is something that only is applicable in social service agencies? I'm here to tell you, if that is your perception, then you're under an illusion, because there are many survivors of all types of traumatic experiences in your workplace today that, because of your or lack thereof commitment or understanding of what it means to be trauma informed, there's certainly an opportunity there for improvement. And I can raise my hand and attest to what type of performance has followed as I have been supported with the right support systems around me as I've navigated my own childhood traumas. And so what we know is that ACEs are common, they're in the workplace, and that organizations that adopt trauma-informed approaches are really beginning to address one of the missing pieces that is a critical impediment to some of the progress. And there's other things, but that's just one example of something to think about as you are looking at how to navigate cross-cultural relationships, being trauma-informed. So I'll share with you a little bit about my background when it comes to this cross-cultural history with cross-cultural relationships. For me, this goes back all the way into when I came into my college experience, actually here at the University of South Dakota. Here in South Dakota is where I'm at. I'm here in Sioux Falls. You can go ahead and the next slide for me, please. I grew up in an environment, single parent home of 6 in northeast Omaha, Nebraska. And the challenges that I experienced there in my single parent home and in my environment where, you know, there was drugs, violence, and gangs and such for the first 18 years of my life, there were other families and people like me. But when I went to college as a first generation college student here in a small town called Vermilion, it was the first time that I felt different. And I realized that I was different because it was a predominantly a white institution, liberal arts institution, great learning environment there. But I realized that I was different and I was unique. And when I was about 19 years old, I remember telling myself that I wanted my differences to not intimidate people, frighten people, and I wanted them honored and respected. And when I was 18, 19 years old, I decided to adopt the golden rule, that I would treat people the way I wanted to be treated. And I became a person who was just so intrigued by differences instead of frightened by differences. I was a person who led with curiosity instead of suspicion. I began to just really become fascinated with everything that was not like me. And in that approach, what I was able to do is really grow a very large friend group, gain a lot of popularity, where ultimately I ended up presiding over 5 different student groups while I was in college. Our Black Student Union, I was the inaugural president for that. And then even ultimately I became our Student Government Association president, the first African-American president there at that school. And so for those 5 years of undergrad and 3 more years of grad school, I navigated leadership in that role, in those roles. And I got a lot of reps at what it was to be cross-cultural, because there was a representation from the International Student Club, different parts of Asia, Central America, all the small towns in South Dakota. And I learned about these unique things that were different than me, like graduating classes of 25 and 30 and 18 and places with one stop, like all different type of other differences, but I embraced it. As I moved on into my adulthood, I worked in the service industry for quite some time as a host, as a bartender, and as a busser. And I had all these opportunities to hold doors and serve people of all different backgrounds and income levels. And my job was hospitality. And I got a lot of reps at what it was to just interact with people from various lifestyles and groups. And now finally today in the nonprofit sector, as the founder and CEO at the Hurdle Life Coach, I navigate cross-cultural relationships day in and day out, intergenerational, multi-ethnic religion, spirituality. It goes on and on and on of the opportunities I get today to continue to practice cross-cultural relationship building that started for me as a first-generation college student back in Vermilion. And so I realized, as I look back in hindsight, 16 years of practicing cross-cultural relationships, doing pretty well in those roles. I really lived this, and I'm so eager and sincerely passionate about sharing with you some of the things that I've learned. So let's go into some opening discussion and questions. Again, I've talked about this just a little bit. I'll just hint on it one more time. You know, what's working well within your services to diverse talent? Ask yourself that question, jot those things down. What challenges do diverse staff have, and how have they and have you felt in this environment? Where do you have opportunities to learn more? Figuring out exactly where those opportunities are at. And then what struggles are you experiencing when it comes to this conversation as well? And then you can see there in the graphic too, the levels of inclusion and ways that we all can be involved. So where I like to start with, you can go ahead, where I like to start with when I'm having a conversation about cross-cultural relationship building is to first really help people to get a understanding of communities and cultures. So when we think of community, you know, oftentimes we think of our neighborhood as a community. And that's fair and that's fine. What I like to really help people to do is to understand that, yeah, there is the macro community that we live in our hometown or our state, but there are so many micro communities within the macro community. And what I try to do is, or what I do is help people to see all of the micro communities within the macro communities, because within every community, there is a culture. So as you first navigate what it is to be cross-cultural, I bring people back a layer so they can see how many different communities actually exist within our larger community. So there are many circles, and within the circle, there is the cultures. So think about bankers. Bankers, that's a community. Law enforcement, that's a community. Youth is a community. Elders is a community. Believers and non-believers, those are communities. A female community, a male community. All these different environments where people coalesce, and within their community, they have different cultures. Every culture has pillars. They have what is language, music, food, and norms. A lot of times what I try to help people to recognize in my work is that in the prison, that's a whole different community. And in that community, there's a language that they use there. There are norms that exist there in that community. In the schools, if you walk into a school, that's a whole nother community. There's a language that teachers speak. If you go into a hospital, that's a community. There's a whole nother language that people speak in the hospital, in the banks, in the schools, in the prisons. And so as you first start to really see how many micro circles are within the macro circle of the community that we really recognize. And of course, as we really start to get to like some of the more physical things, you'll realize that there's also ethnic communities, racial communities, gender, and those things. But I like to first start by helping people to see that there's so many micro communities within the macro communities, and within every community, there is the culture. So as we go into culture again, music, language, food, norms, you know, I think about the different norms that exist within my culture and others, right? Just things like, you know, yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. And really having that level of honoring of our elders, and being able to, as a person who is working with diverse communities, understanding what people's norms are and being able to accept some of those norms. I think about working with our Native American population that we have here in South Dakota. And some places they have the misperception that a lack of eye contact is some type of a disrespect, but really in the Native American culture, not engaging in eye contact is a sign of respect. And so as you're looking at the different cultures, ethnic cultures, racial cultures, gender cultures, you have to ask yourself, what are the norms within the culture? Because as you'll see when I get into some of the strategies, the first strategy is being able to embrace other people's norms as you are working to be cross-cultural. And I also like to remind people at times, even in the Eastern culture, that silence is reverence, and silence can be honor. And so at times where we might misperceive a person being quiet as them being recluse and disengaged, when in fact, in some cultures, to be silenced in the presence of wisdom is a form of honoring. And so just really being able to do the research to understand all of the communities that are within your work community, what are the norms of those micro communities, and how is it that we can shape an environment that embraces their norms. When it comes to being cross-cultural and relationship building, really what you're tasked with doing is navigating differences. So said differently, being cross-culturally competent is having the ability to navigate differences. When I do this education, I like to start with defining diversity. And I'll tell you that diversity means differences. And yes, it is true that we all have much more in common than we do not have in common, but it is also true that we all are uniquely different. So as we define diversity as differences, we recognize that being a champion for diversity is actually a benefit to everyone, because to be diverse is to be different, and everyone has those differences. So navigating the differences is practicing cross-cultural relationship dynamics. One of the things that's going to help you as you do this is navigating the language of diversity. And so, you know, I've been working with employers and leaders, and sometimes they come into this level of discomfort of, how do I even talk about this? What is the safe language to be able to address some of these issues that we have in front of us when it comes to race relations, gender identity, and those different types of things. And that's fair. And so some of the things that I just put out there for people to just help them grip onto this is understanding that now people are using the word BIPOC. And for those who are seeing this in the text and around and not understanding what it means, it just stands for Black, Indigenous, and person of color. And so as you're trying to navigate, how do I identify a person of color? Is it African American? Is it Black American? Is it Native American? Different parts of the world. Being able to get more comfortable with using that term BIPOC is going to help you to be able to walk into this conversation with a little more comfort and less insecurity. Doing your work to understand pronouns, because there's a lot going on now in the workplace with gender identity. And I know for the most part, people are pretty keen to the LGBTQ, but I also like to remind people that, and again, where I'm at in South Dakota, we have a very large Native American population. It's also imperative that we also include those two-spirit identifiers onto the pronouns as well, LGBTQ2+. And so again, as we just think about all of the cultures that are represented, how can we be inclusive in our language when we're walking through Black, Indigenous, people of color, and also the conversations around pronouns. Another thing, when it comes to attracting diverse talent, creating safe environments is something that is imperative. When I do my work in trauma-informed care, the foundation of trauma-informed care is safety. And where I peel back the layers on this training is to say safety in all of its forms. It's more than just a physically safe environment. We have to create environments where there's emotional safety, psychological safety, intellectual safety, and also spiritual safety. And in the workplace, what that looks like is when people are sharing their ideas, when people have ideas, when people are sharing their truths about how they feel about stuff, it's imperative that we as employers and supervisors, we're able to be in the state where we're able to let it land without judgment, without critique, and in a way that it is accepted for where they are at. What keeps people locked up and not drawing onto environments is not feeling safe. If an employee can't tell you that they're frustrated about something, sad about something, angry about something, without you thinking they don't have the right to be, or this is not the place for that, you're working counterintuitive to creating emotional safety. When employees are giving ideas on how we can get better and their ideas aren't given legs, you're working counterintuitive to what it is to have intellectual safety and spiritual safety when it comes to various religious beliefs. And so as you navigate cross-cultural communications, relationship building, sensitivity, safety in all its forms, I'm inviting you to take a look beyond physical environment, which of course is important, but look at the emotional, psychological, spiritual safety as well. I'm going to give you a couple more things and we'll jump into hard strategies. Celebrating diverse holidays and religious celebrations. Where is your employee? Where are you as an employer when it comes to understanding what are the various holidays within the different cultures that are represented within your workplace? And how are you doing at honoring those holidays? Are you making mention of those things? Is there physical representation of those things in your workplace? Because I'm here to tell you, as you look to attract and retain, right? And now let's talk retention. You may do a great job of recruiting talent, and then they get into your environment and they do not see themselves. And now all of a sudden they don't feel comfortable, and you are dealing with attrition sooner than you would like to. All of a sudden you've lost talent within 30 days, within 60 days, within 90 days. Because now that you've done effective recruiting methods, you've got them into the work environment and now they don't see themselves. And yes, it is an ongoing challenge to recruit diverse talent that looks like them, but what could your physical environment do that ensures that they see themselves? How can your physical environment reflect a sense of belonging? How can the way you honor holidays and celebrations demonstrate to that diverse talent that they belong there? So there's an opportunity for you there to really do your research, do your pre-work, because the way through this is in the work. And it takes doing a lot of pre-work to prep these environments where inclusion and belonging is felt by your diverse talent. Your holidays and your celebrations is going to be a part of that. Understanding the breadth of diversity. If, for those who are in this space, I'm sure you've seen the iceberg. 10% of the iceberg is on top, 90% is under the bottom. And the 90% is the things that you cannot see. When we're talking diversity, we're talking beyond race, religion, ethnicity, gender, and physical ability. There is a whole nother 90% of what it is to understand the breadth of diversity that is beneath the iceberg. Things like household income, family structure, travel experience, life experiences, addiction history, trauma history, incarceration history, perspectives, thoughts, ideas. All of this fourth and fifth dimensional things that you cannot see in the physical, but are absolutely exist and are a real part of the whole identity of a person and an employee. And so as you navigate diversity, understand the breadth and understand that 90% of this work are things that you are not going to be able to see about a person. But as you recognize that and you lean into that, you will become more effective at retaining your diverse talent because you're honoring the diversity that you cannot see, the things that are in that fourth and fifth dimension. A final piece before we jump into strategy, I'd be remiss not to talk about the importance of equality versus equity. Go ahead. So some of you have probably seen this slide. And you can see the slide, you see that there's equality. There it is. Everyone gets the same amount of resources. Everybody's trying to see the baseball game there. But when we distribute resources based on equality, you can see that that's not effective in actually providing equal access. We have to move our efforts and our initiatives, and we have to be fervent in helping people to understand the difference between equality and equity, and that the task at hand today is equitable solutions. Equality is good. I mean, it's fair, but it's not what's necessary right now for equal access. It's equality. So when you look at the different needs of different populations of people, there will be a disparate disbursement of resources based on equitable treatment, not equal treatment. So we got to have that, continue to have that conversation and know that we've got work to do. We're making up ground from ground that has been established historically when it comes to people being oppressed and marginalized, that now today in our collective responsibility, we get to engage in equitable solutions and distribute resources on an equitable basis based on the resources needed for equal access, not equality. Now, let me show you the next visual as well, which is the reality. When we are talking about working with diverse talent, when we are talking about diverse people, we got to understand that we are working with populations of people that in many ways that have been historically marginalized and oppressed. And some populations are so far beneath level playing field, level ground, that we've got so much work to do when it comes to equity. And this is why people like myself and my colleagues won't rest at talking about equality, because historically there are populations that are completely benefited from their privilege, and to no fault of their own. It's just the reality of the situation. But here's the other reality, that we've got ground to make up through equitable action. And as we continue to be advocates for equity, we can actually get people, everyone, to equal access. So let's move into some strategies. I've hinted on this already. This is very important. Strategy number one, when it comes to being cross-culturally competent, sensitive, and aware, is receiving the norms of other people, and recognizing that we are all have our differences, and that when we honor those differences with celebration, with acceptance, then what we're going to be able to accomplish is people who feel safe in their uniqueness, and people that are retained in their uniqueness. So being able to understand, again, some of the things I mentioned around polite language. You know, sometimes I'll call a person sir or ma'am, and they'll go, well, you don't have to call me that, or you don't need to do that. And I know I don't need to, but for me, that's a norm. That's just the way I was raised, and the way I express honor. And so for you to just accept me honoring you through my reverence of calling you ma'am or sir, that's going to actually cause me to feel more comfortable around you, versus you shoving my norm back in my face and saying that that's not necessary here. You don't have to do that. Think about the difference, what happens when you just receive the thing that is my norm. And that norm could be the way I dress. Not only the way I speak, it could be the way I dress, right? And so how are we embracing the norms of people's fashion choice, or hair choice, or style and music choice? How are we in the workplace receiving people's norms in that way? And realizing that when we receive the norms of other people, because people, it's not about having people conform to what it is that we think is the right way. It's about us honoring all the different ways to do it right, right? There's not one right way to integrate, to support each other. It's really being honorous of all of those ways forward. The second strategy when it comes to this is leading with curiosity, not critique, not criticism, and not judgment. And a lot of my conversation has to do with, once you have the talent, I mean, I know, you know, this bucket is big and broad, and we don't have a lot of time to get into all of what's there. when it comes to recruiting strategies. But a lot of the work I do has to do with retention and belonging, and what happens when you have that diverse talent in your workplace. How do you engage and interact with your diverse talent that's in your workplace? How do you prevent yourself from not losing the talent that you work so hard to get? When you have that talent and they're in your workplace, leading with curiosity, not critique or criticism, is going to help you to establish that retention. Just because it's different than you doesn't mean it's a threat to you. Wire that into your mind. Differences does not mean threat. Differences is an opportunity. Differences and diversity, that's a strength. You know, when people are not like me, I get excited about that because they can do what I don't do. I love being surrounded by people that are different than me because they're capable of doing the things that I am not. We become more whole, we become more equipped, we become more capable the more we embrace differences. We're not looking to create a homostasis type of environment. We're not looking to be just, you know, even across the board with all the same talents and strengths. Differences and diversity is strength because it completes the entire like need base by embracing the diversity of strengths in other people in a diversity period. So being able to hone that, being able to be excited about being surrounded by people that are different than you, because we're wired to think differences mean strange, odd, peculiar, I don't want to touch. But when you can rewire your mindset on differences and get curious, hone it, get excited, you're actually developing more of a cavalry by being able to be so open with embracing people's differences. One of the things I think is so important for workplaces when it comes to how do I be curious, and it's the usage of open-ended questions. Equip your staff with motivational interview training. When I went through my motivational interview training, 2 levels, basic and advanced, it just took my ability to coach and lead to a whole nother level. You know, there's this concept within motivational interviewing. It's called ears and ors. And it's the ability to be very good at asking open-ended questions, using affirmation, which is the A, reflective listening. So what I'm hearing you say is this. What I heard you say was this, right? Instead of being so command-based, where it's do this, do that, practicing motivational interviewing and using our ears as a tool and as a mode of how we communicate, using reflective listening as a strategy is going to evoke a level of trust more with your workforce. And then also the S is summarizing. So when you have the ors, you're open-ended questions, affirming, reflecting, and summarizing, and you can actually switch out the O for an E, and when it becomes ears, and you practice how it is that you evoke. And so now, when you get great and proficient at being a motivational interviewer, you're good at asking questions like, tell me more about your culture. Tell me more about your background. I'm curious to know, how are things different here than where you were from? What kind of things would make you more comfortable here? How can I be more helpful to you? What are the impediments to you accomplishing your assigned task at hand or with the duties within the scope of your role? Can you sense that? Can you feel what might happen to an employee who's being addressed with questions like this that evoke and motivate them to share more of themselves? Can you hear the curiosity in the way that I'm framing those questions? Because see, leadership is more than just giving commands. It's asking great questions. It's more than just active and reflective listening. I'll take you to the next level. It's empathetic listening. Being able to hear the emotion behind what the person is saying. So your training on emotional intelligence and your emotional quotient, absolutely critical as well when it comes to engaging diverse talent. Because now when I'm listening to a person and I can identify the emotion because I'm empathetically listening, and I can say to them, I can see that this makes you sad, or that I can see you're excited about this, all of a sudden I'm doing the work to connect deeper to the person, deeper to the whole person, which is going to cause them to feel seen by me, heard by me, and valued. And beyond just getting the information through effective motivational interviewing, it's absolutely taking action. So we have to take action on what it is that we discovered, as well as we continue to lead with curiosity. And your employees and the clients that you serve, they're going of diverse, they will have hurdles. So what you're going to find out is, what are those real challenges? But at Hurdle Life, we remind everyone we work with that just like on the track, the obstacles and barriers in life are also meant to be hurdled. So when you're asking, what are your barriers and obstacles, and how can I help you overcome those obstacles, you got to be ready to provide the support that's needed as an employer when these issues are coming up. So because the curiosity will yield the information you don't know and reveal the impediments to the workplace performance. So as you're trying to increase workplace performance and you're dealing with disengagement and you're starting to use curiosity as a strategy, your motivational interviewing, your empathetic listening, you're going to hear about what's causing the disengagement. But as I mentioned, when those employees, they will stay because they feel safe, heard, and supported. And those sincere, open-ended questions will help the others feel heard. And when you help them navigate their problems, they're going to feel supported. They're going to feel safe. And ultimately, this is a part of creating that trauma-informed environment. Here's another action point. Your organization needs to have a community resource navigator, either in-house or contracted. And you must realize that your employee is a whole person, not just a body and a brain to complete tasks assigned to them within the scope of their role. Your organization needs a resource navigator, either in-house or contracted, because your employee is a whole person. It reminds me of some friends I have in my community. Their company's called Think 3D Solutions, and they provide culture consultation. And what they talk about is personal development, professional development, and potential. And in a lot of workplaces, what we do, we invest in development for your professional role and the potential of what you can be professionally. And we tell you to leave your personal life at the door. I'm here to tell you that if that is your approach, then you're missing a huge opportunity on personal development, because if you help an employee become a good person, 100% of the time, you're going to get a better employee. Also, but if you only focus on employee professional development and potential, you're leaving a whole piece of them out of the equation, and they're not going to feel fully supported. So being able to have a community resource navigator that can help high crisis employees or employees of all different backgrounds or real life challenges as well is going to help you to retain your diverse talent as well. I enjoy doing that work with some of the employers that I work with. Your master key for today's seminar, culture of humility. This is a major key. The acceptance that in some places I do not know and I do not understand. So often we're so quick to be relatable and say, I know and I understand, when that's not the fact. You do not know and you do not understand. And being able to have the humility to own that and to say that is going to help the diverse population pool understand that you're an honest person, that you're a humble person, and that you're open to be taught. See, humility is recognizing that I need help, the willingness to ask for it, and the openness to receiving it. So are you humble in your exploration of cultures? You know, when it comes to being Native American, African American, there's so many things that some people just can't relate to. I'll tell you right now, being a Black American and already being born fitting the description, that's something that other people cannot relate to. You don't know what it is like to know that subconsciously people are wired to be afraid of you because of the color of your skin. So don't tell me you understand when you don't. Similarly, so Native Americans and what they've been through with the trauma of having grandparents taken and stolen and language hidden. You don't know, you don't understand. When it comes to being a female and some of the the male privileges and the challenges of being objectified as a man. I don't know. I don't understand. Being able to be honest about cultures in which I do not relate to, having that culture of humility is going to be able to allow for people to draw onto you, ready to share and give, versus you saying you understand and you have it figured out when you when you don't. So cultural humility is huge here. Professional humility also such. Our third strategy as we move into this and land this plane, I talked about it a little bit already. I'll mention it again, and you can go ahead. That's celebrating, embracing, and engaging food, language, and music. You know, you're looking to retain your diverse talent pool. How are you celebrating their heritage? You know, what type of potlucks are happening? And you know, the thing, a thing I'll demystify is that there's really no such thing as white culture, right? It's Norwegian, it's German, it's Swedish. It's like we've got to move beyond these distortions of what it is to be white or to be black, and get into the actual culture of things, and then invite people to share their culture, share their food, learn a language, right? Why is it that the work, the burden of the labor is put on, you know, people of other languages to learn English, but we as primary English language learners are not doing the work to learn other languages, leaning with that curiosity into learning other languages as well. And so not just putting the burden on others to learn the English language, but for us to learn languages as well, even if that's things like basic greetings and salutations. Like I know how to say hello in German and Spanish, and it's really basic French, like como se va, como estás, ich liebe dich in German means I love you. And so even just being able to have a little bit of that representation of, you know what, I'm open to learning to communicate with you more effectively. And it's not just about you learning to communicate with me more effectively. So how can we embrace language in that way as well? Potluck dinners, food, things like that. Holidays I talked about, and even music. What type of celebrations, what type of ways can you use music in your environment that people know that they belong? I'll give you this lighthouse moment and I'll wrap this up. English as a lingua franca. Next slide, please. You know, what I've learned through some of my friends in English language learning is English is a language that's spoken all over the world. And when you hear people who have an accent when it comes to English, we need not to assume that means that there's going to be a language barrier because they have an accent to the when they're using the English. When you hear an accent with English, when you identify that means that person is multilingual, and that's a benefit and that's a strength. If you hear that accent over that English, this person is multilingual, which means they're a bridge into a whole nother culture and community that you are not. We have to move beyond when we hear that Middle Eastern accent or African accent or whatever the accent is on top of that English, and realize that English is a lingua franca, and that accent is an indicator of multilingual capability, and that is an absolute bridge into other cultures. We need to lean in to multilingual professionals and not push them out feeling like that barrier to English or that accent is going to impede performance, when actually it's going to enhance cross-cultural relationships. So in closing, some things to consider as you are doing this work, you know, utilizing cultural liaison, employee advocates to assist in learning sensitive information, neutral party locations when you're having hard conversations, assuming the best, seek to understand first. Misunderstandings and miscommunications are the primary form of dysfunction. So seek to understand first. And as you are dissecting and metabolizing the things that I've said here, based on these presentation, How can some of the scenarios in your workplace be improved? And what are the next steps you can identify to enhance your cross-cultural relationships in the place that you work? Final slide is a thank you. Gratitude changes everything. Be appreciative of what you have, what is already there. So often we get lost in what we don't have, and we get a sense of dissatisfaction for what is not yet in our possession. Be grateful for what you do have. There's so much abundance in the day. I'm so thankful for the opportunity to present the Hurdle Life perspectives and opinions and thoughts on this national stage with COAID and at this wonderful, wonderful conference. Absolutely here as an ongoing resource to do it again. Would love to have an opportunity to continue to talk about what happens when we embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion. What is it to be cross-culturally sensitive and aware in the workplace? How can we be more trauma-informed and just better human beings? For me, when I boil this down, this comes down to civility and decency. And when we can just want to be more civil one to another, more decent one to another, and inclusive for all, we can get to where it is that we all believe we're capable of going. So again, I'm so thankful and grateful to have the opportunity. Thank you, COAID, and all of the others that were here to listen to some of my perspectives. Thank you very much. Go out there and hurdle life. Thank you very much.